I have a little bit different assignment for you today. A short discussion on the concept of patron and client in the first century. And then I actually want you to do something that I hope will be fun and watch a short clip from the movie The Godfather, which I think is the best illustration I've seen in a modern day setting of what patron-client probably was in the first century. To understand the patron-client relationship, you have to know that it was everywhere in the first century, in a Jewish culture, in a Roman culture, and it was a way of life. And the reason it was that way is because that there was a limited access to resources. Now, these might be legal resources, these might be monetary resources, these might be food, but very few people controlled an awful lot of society. The top 5 or 10% of the rich people controlled everything else. So typically what most people had was they had a patron, and they would normally stick with these patrons through generations long. So if your father was the patron of somebody, then you as the son would automatically inherit those people as your clients. And you saw this go through multiple generations. But the way it would work out is the richest person in town, or if there are several rich people in town, these people actually would compete for clients. If you were a person who needed something done, you would go to this patron and you'd say, "Can you please help me with this?" And the patron typically would be glad to help you, because the more clients a patron had, the higher status that patron had. So the patron would help you with something. Then in return for this, you were expected to be loyal to that patron, again, lifelong in many cases, and you were supposed to tell everybody how great the patron was. If you think back to what I talked to you about houses in the first century, and walking down a street and seeing these houses and the patrons in action, you could actually tell who the most powerful, successful patron in town was, because each morning the clients would line up outside his house to go in and give him the morning greeting, as it was called. So you could walk down the street, and the person who had the largest line of clients outside his house was obviously the most famous, powerful, high-status person in town. So the client would go in each morning, say, "Good morning, Mr. Patron, how you doing? Looks like you've lost a little weight. Your hair is looking real nice this morning." And the patron would either find out if there's anything the client needed that day as far as government access, permits, buying a slave, or in many cases would actually give the client food for the day or money to buy food for the day. So it was a continuing daily relationship, and you were, as a client, expected to give loyalty and publicity to your patron, and a patron, you were supposed to take care of your client. So it was a mutual responsibility. Now, the way this works out in the first century, and particularly for Paul, is if you accepted money from someone, there was the danger of establishing a patron-client relationship. And think about this in terms of the Corinthians, who were incredibly status conscious, and you might begin to understand why Paul would not accept money from people. Now, if you think about it, if you're the rich guy in town and Paul's come to town preaching, it is a high status thing to have him at your house. And if you give him money, then on some level, as a patron, you expect your client, Paul, to respond to you with loyalty and good publicity. Now, how are you going to react when you've given Paul money, you've given Paul clothes, you've given him some place to stay, and all of a sudden he starts attacking you on the way you conduct the Lord's Supper or something like that? So you see that this patron-client thing is really tied up in the New Testament culture, and you see it played out in a lot more of the books of Paul's letters. And think about whether Paul considers himself a patron or a client. Now, is he a client to Jesus, his patron? Yes, I think so. He gives Jesus his undying loyalty and tells everybody how great Jesus is. But in turn, then Paul wants to make sure that he is the patron of the people underneath him, and he is the patron of the church. So I'll give you a URL on the Charger Learning to look up this Godfather scenario. But as you go through the movie, be thinking about how this could play out in the New Testament, and think about Paul interviewing with the Godfather to see if he would act the same way that this guy does, or if Paul would accept, if Paul would bow his head and kiss the hand of the Godfather. So as you look through the little clip, notice this kind of key words. There's loyalty, there's friendship, there's respect, the dry cleaner, whoever he is, the funeral home director, I forget, but has a paradise in America, and he's expecting on American justice to solve his problems. And when it can't happen, he has to come to the Godfather. And notice how he approaches the Godfather, and then eventually what the Godfather does. So the guy bows his head and offers the Godfather friendship and respect. In other words, commitment. And the Godfather pats it, kind of nods his head, okay, now you've done it, and pats the guy almost like he would pat a loyal dog on the head. And in the context of the movie, that's what this guy has become, a loyal dog to the Godfather. And again, notice at the end of the segment, the Godfather reminds this guy that there are responsibilities associated with the patron-client relationship. So view this, think about it, we may discuss it on the forum, and then again, put Paul in this situation and see if Paul would ever have sort of bowed the knee and kissed the hand of the Godfather, knowing what kind of commitment that would have placed on Paul. So let me know if this works for y'all. If not, we'll try something else different again. Thanks.